Question 1. Cost-benefit analysis shows that while a wide array of email forensics tools exist, a certified forensic security professional, CFSP, must select tools that not only offer comprehensive analysis capabilities, but also ensure the defensibility of findings in a legal context. Considering the need for reliable data extraction, preservation of evidence integrity, and the generation of legally admissible reports, which approach to tool selection and utilization best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory expectations for a CFSP. Option A. Utilize a combination of free, open-source tools that are readily available, focusing on those that can quickly identify keywords and basic email metadata without extensive validation or formal reporting features. Option B. Employ a single, proprietary tool that is exclusively used by the investigating organization, assuming its internal testing is sufficient, and bypass external validation or peer review of its forensic capabilities. Option C. Prioritize tools that are widely recognized and validated within the digital forensics community, capable of detailed parsing of email headers, bodies, and attachments, and that generate comprehensive, auditable reports with clear chain of custody documentation. Option D. Select the most recently released, feature-rich tool that promises the fastest processing times, regardless of its validation status or established reputation in the forensic field. The correct answer is C. Prioritize tools that are widely recognized and validated within the digital forensics community, capable of detailed parsing of email headers, bodies, and attachments, and that generate comprehensive, auditable reports with clear chain of custody documentation. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because the Certified Forensic Security Professional, CFSP, must balance the need for thorough evidence acquisition and analysis with the practical constraints of time and resources, all while adhering to strict legal and ethical standards. The choice of email forensics tools directly impacts the efficiency, accuracy, and defensibility of the investigation. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes tools that are widely accepted within the forensic community, have a proven track record of reliability and accuracy, and are capable of producing reports that meet legal admissibility standards. Such tools often undergo rigorous validation and are supported by regular updates, ensuring their effectiveness against evolving email formats and encryption. Adherence to established forensic methodologies, including proper chain of custody and documentation, is paramount for maintaining the integrity of digital evidence. This aligns with the CFSP ethical obligation to conduct investigations with integrity and to present findings in a manner that is both understandable and legally sound. An incorrect approach that relies solely on proprietary, unvalidated tools without independent verification poses significant regulatory and ethical risks. Such tools may not have undergone the scrutiny necessary to ensure their accuracy and reliability, potentially leading to flawed analysis and inadmissible evidence. This violates the professional duty to use scientifically sound methods and could lead to legal challenges regarding the integrity of the evidence. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness, perhaps by using automated scripts that skip critical validation steps or fail to account for nuances in email headers and metadata, risks overlooking crucial evidence or misinterpreting its significance. This can result in incomplete investigations and a failure to meet the standard of care expected of a forensic professional, potentially leading to ethical breaches related to diligence and competence. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific investigative objectives and the nature of the digital evidence. This should be followed by researching and evaluating available tools based on their forensic capabilities, validation status, reporting features, and compatibility with the operating environment. A critical step involves considering the legal and regulatory requirements for evidence admissibility in the relevant jurisdiction. Finally, the chosen tools and methodologies must be documented meticulously to ensure transparency and defensibility throughout the investigation and any subsequent legal proceedings. Question 2. The evaluation methodology shows a scenario where a certified forensic security professional, CFSP, is investigating a suspected unauthorized data transfer from a corporate network. The initial assessment suggests that sensitive customer information may have been exfiltrated. The CFSP needs to determine the specific network protocol and communication pathways utilized during the suspected exfiltration event to provide actionable intelligence and evidence. Which of the following investigative steps best aligns with the principles of forensic network analysis and the requirements for admissible evidence? Option A. Focus solely on analyzing endpoint logs for evidence of file access and modification, assuming that network-level investigation is secondary to endpoint forensics in data exfiltration cases. Option B. Immediately block all outbound network connections suspected of being involved in the exfiltration, without first capturing and analyzing the relevant network traffic. Option C. Rely on user reports and anecdotal evidence regarding unusual network activity to infer the exfiltration method, without performing detailed packet-level analysis. Option D. Analyze network traffic captures, PCAP, to identify the specific protocols, e.g., HTTP, FTP, SMB, DNS, used for communication, correlate timestamps with suspicious activity logs from firewalls and intrusion detection systems, and examine the payload of relevant packets for evidence of data transfer. The correct answer is D. Analyze network traffic captures, PCAP, to identify the specific protocols, e.g., HTTP, FTP, SMB, DNS, used for communication, correlate timestamps with suspicious activity logs from firewalls and intrusion detection systems, and examine the payload of relevant packets for evidence of data transfer. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a scenario where a certified forensic security professional, CFSP, is tasked with investigating a suspected data exfiltration event. The challenge lies in accurately identifying the network protocols and communication patterns involved to pinpoint the source and method of data loss, all while adhering to strict legal and regulatory frameworks governing digital evidence. The professional must demonstrate a deep understanding of the TCP/IP suite, not just theoretically, but in its practical application for forensic analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based methodology that prioritizes the integrity of the data and the chain of custody. This includes capturing network traffic using appropriate tools, analyzing packet captures, PCAP, to identify specific protocols, e.g., HTTP, FTP, SMB, DNS, and correlating this information with logs from various network devices and endpoints. This methodical analysis ensures that the findings are accurate, reproducible, and admissible in legal proceedings, aligning with the CFSP ethical obligations and any relevant jurisdictional laws concerning digital forensics and data privacy. The professional decision-making process here hinges on a thorough understanding of network forensics principles and the legal admissibility of digital evidence. An incorrect approach would be to make assumptions about the exfiltration method without concrete evidence from the network traffic. For instance, focusing solely on endpoint logs without analyzing network communication would miss crucial details about how data left the network. Another incorrect approach would be to alter or discard captured network data without proper documentation and justification, thereby compromising the integrity of the evidence. Such actions would violate fundamental forensic principles and potentially lead to the exclusion of evidence in a legal context, demonstrating a failure to uphold professional standards and regulatory requirements. A further incorrect approach would be to rely on anecdotal information or non-technical speculation rather than empirical data derived from protocol analysis. This demonstrates a lack of technical rigor and an inability to apply the principles of forensic science to the investigation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Clearly defining the scope of the investigation and the objectives. 2. Employing forensically sound methods for data acquisition and preservation. 3. Conducting a detailed analysis of network protocols and communication patterns, supported by appropriate tools and techniques. 4. Corroborating findings with other relevant evidence sources. 5. Documenting all steps taken, observations, and conclusions meticulously. 6. Ensuring all actions comply with applicable laws, regulations, and ethical guidelines. Question 3. The monitoring system demonstrates unusual activity on a server managed by a company that is a client of your forensic security firm. During the initial review of the system logs, you recognize the username associated with the suspicious activity as belonging to a close personal friend. This friend has no official role within the client company. What is the most appropriate professional course of action? Option A. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to the client and legal counsel, and recuse yourself from further involvement in the investigation. Option B. Conduct a preliminary, limited investigation to confirm the nature of the activity before deciding whether to disclose the relationship. Option C. Inform your friend about the monitoring system's findings to understand their actions before reporting to the client. Option D. Proceed with the investigation, assuring the client that your professional ethics will prevent any personal bias from influencing your findings. Correct answer is A. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to the client and legal counsel, and recuse yourself from further involvement in the investigation. Explanation. This scenario presents a significant ethical challenge for a certified forensic security professional, CFSP, due to the potential for a conflict of interest and the imperative of maintaining legal compliance and professional integrity. The core difficulty lies in balancing the duty to conduct a thorough and unbiased forensic investigation with the personal relationship with the individual whose data is being examined. The CFSP must navigate the delicate line between professional obligation and personal acquaintance to ensure the integrity of the investigation and uphold the trust placed in their expertise. The correct approach involves immediate and transparent disclosure of the personal relationship to all relevant parties, including the client and legal counsel, and recusal from the investigation. This upholds the principle of objectivity, a cornerstone of forensic practice. By recusing themselves, the CFSP avoids any perception of bias, whether actual or perceived, thereby safeguarding the integrity of the evidence and the investigation's outcome. This aligns with the CFSP Ethical Code, which mandates avoiding conflicts of interest and maintaining impartiality. Furthermore, it ensures strict adherence to legal compliance by preventing any potential challenges to the admissibility of evidence due to compromised objectivity. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the investigation without disclosing the relationship. This constitutes a serious ethical breach, violating the duty of candor and potentially leading to a conflict of interest. Legally, it could render the forensic findings inadmissible in court, undermining the entire investigation and exposing the CFSP to disciplinary action and legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to conduct the investigation while downplaying the personal relationship and assuring impartiality. While seemingly well-intentioned, this still fails to address the inherent risk of bias and the appearance of impropriety, which can be as damaging as actual bias. It neglects the fundamental ethical requirement for complete transparency when a potential conflict exists. The professional decision-making process in such situations should begin with a self-assessment of any potential conflicts of interest. If a conflict is identified, the immediate next step is full and frank disclosure to all stakeholders. This transparency allows for informed decisions regarding the continuation of the investigation or the need for recusal. The CFSP must prioritize the integrity of the forensic process and the legal system above personal relationships or potential client pressure. Adherence to the CFSP Code of Ethics and relevant legal statutes governing digital forensics is paramount. Question 4. The efficiency study reveals that a network forensic analyst, tasked with investigating a suspected data exfiltration event, is using Wireshark to capture network traffic. The analyst is concerned about the sheer volume of data and is considering applying display filters in real time during the capture to only see traffic related to specific IP addresses identified in initial threat intelligence. This is intended to speed up the initial review process. What is the most appropriate course of action for the analyst to ensure the integrity and admissibility of the captured network traffic for forensic purposes? Option A. Begin analyzing the live capture stream directly within Wireshark as it is being captured, focusing on the suspicious traffic, without saving the raw packet data to a file first. Option B. Capture all raw network traffic, and then immediately apply a capture filter to reduce the data size before saving the file, as this will make the file more manageable for analysis. Option C. Capture all raw network traffic without applying any real-time display filters. Save the capture to a file, generate a cryptographic hash of the file, and then perform analysis on a copy of the saved capture file. Option D. Apply real-time display filters in Wireshark to only capture traffic from the identified IP addresses, as this will significantly reduce the data volume and expedite the analysis. The correct answer is C. Capture all raw network traffic without applying any real-time display filters, save the capture to a file, generate a cryptographic hash of the file, and then perform analysis on a copy of the saved capture file. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics where the integrity and admissibility of captured network traffic are paramount. The professional difficulty lies in balancing the need for comprehensive data collection with the strict requirements for evidence handling and analysis, particularly under the regulatory framework governing forensic investigations. Ensuring that the captured packets are not altered, that the capture process itself is documented, and that the analysis is conducted in a manner that maintains the chain of custody is critical for any subsequent legal or internal disciplinary proceedings. Efficiency studies findings highlight a potential shortcut that, while seemingly faster, could compromise the entire investigation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves utilizing Wireshark in a manner that prioritizes the integrity of the captured data and adheres to established forensic protocols. This includes ensuring that Wireshark is configured to capture raw packets without any modification or filtering that could alter the original traffic. Furthermore, the capture process must be meticulously documented, including the timestamp, the network segment being monitored, the specific interface used, and the version of Wireshark. The captured file should be saved in a standard format, e.g., PCAP, and immediately secured with a cryptographic hash generated to verify its integrity. Analysis should then be performed on a copy of the original capture file, preserving the original for chain of custody. This approach aligns with best practices in digital forensics, emphasizing data integrity, proper documentation, and chain of custody, which are implicitly or explicitly required by forensic standards and legal admissibility rules. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves applying real-time display filters in Wireshark during the capture process to reduce the volume of displayed traffic. This is professionally unacceptable because display filters do not prevent the capture of the filtered-out packets. They merely hide them from view. However, if the analyst later attempts to analyze the capture based on the displayed data, they might overlook crucial evidence that was filtered out. More critically, if the analyst mistakenly believes they are only capturing the filtered traffic, it represents a fundamental misunderstanding of Wireshark's functionality and a failure to capture all relevant data, potentially violating the principle of comprehensive evidence collection. Another incorrect approach is to immediately begin analyzing the live capture stream within Wireshark without first saving the raw packet data to a file. While Wireshark allows for live analysis, this practice is risky. If the capture is interrupted, or if the analyst makes an error during live analysis that inadvertently modifies the capture buffer, the original data could be lost or corrupted. This bypasses the critical step of securing the raw evidence in its original state, jeopardizing the chain of custody and the integrity of the captured traffic, which are fundamental to its admissibility and reliability in a forensic context. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with such a scenario should adopt a systematic approach that prioritizes evidence integrity and adherence to forensic best practices. The decision-making process should involve 1. Understanding the specific requirements of the investigation and the applicable regulatory framework for evidence handling. 2. Selecting tools and configuring them in a manner that ensures the capture of raw, unaltered data. 3. Meticulously documenting every step of the capture and analysis process. 4. Implementing robust chain of custody procedures, including hashing and secure storage of original evidence. 5. Performing analysis on copies of the evidence to preserve the original. This methodical approach ensures that the findings are defensible and that the evidence meets the necessary standards for admissibility. Question 5. Stakeholder feedback indicates a concern regarding the timely acquisition and preservation of digital evidence from a suspect's personal laptop seized during an ongoing criminal investigation. The laptop contains potentially crucial information, but the investigative team is awaiting a formal warrant for a full forensic examination. In the interim, the lead investigator is pressuring the forensic security professional to access the device to quickly identify any immediate threats or exculpatory evidence, suggesting they just take a quick look at the most likely locations for relevant files. Which of the following actions best aligns with the regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines for a certified forensic security professional, CFSP, in this situation? Option A. Advise the investigator that immediate access is not permissible without a warrant and suggest they prioritize obtaining the necessary legal authorization to avoid compromising the investigation. Option B. Securely image the entire laptop to create a forensic copy, store the original in a secure evidence locker, and await the issuance of the warrant before commencing any analysis or data access. Option C. Attempt to access the laptop using the suspect's last known password, believing that consent is implied by the seizure of the device. Option D. Immediately access the laptop and search for specific file types identified by the investigator, deleting any files deemed irrelevant to expedite the process. The correct answer is B. Securely image the entire laptop to create a forensic copy, store the original in a secure evidence locker, and await the issuance of the warrant before commencing any analysis or data access. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a forensic security professional to balance the immediate need for data access with the stringent legal and ethical obligations surrounding digital evidence. The core conflict lies in the potential for evidence spoliation versus the urgency of an ongoing investigation. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any actions taken to preserve or acquire digital evidence do not compromise its integrity or admissibility in legal proceedings. Adhering strictly to the Certified Forensic Security Professional (CFSP) ethical code and relevant U.S. federal regulations governing digital evidence. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the preservation of digital evidence in its most pristine state, thereby upholding its integrity and admissibility. This aligns with the fundamental principles of digital forensics and the legal requirements for chain of custody and evidence handling. Specifically, it adheres to guidelines such as those outlined in the U.S. Department of Justice's Legal and Procedural Issues in Computer Investigations and the CFSP own Code of Ethics, which mandate acting with integrity and competence and avoiding actions that could prejudice an investigation or legal process. An incorrect approach that involves immediate, unauthorized access to the suspect's personal device without proper legal authorization, e.g., a warrant, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This violates the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures, and could lead to the suppression of any evidence obtained. Ethically, it breaches the CFSP duty to act lawfully and with respect for individual privacy. Another incorrect approach, such as deleting potentially irrelevant data to speed up the forensic analysis, constitutes evidence spoliation. This is a severe ethical and legal violation. It directly undermines the integrity of the evidence, potentially hindering the investigation and leading to legal repercussions for the investigator and the organization. This contravenes the CFSP obligation to preserve evidence and the legal standards for maintaining an unbroken chain of custody. A third incorrect approach, which is to delay the forensic examination indefinitely due to a lack of immediate clarity on the scope of the investigation, also presents a failure. While caution is necessary, undue delay can lead to the degradation of volatile data, making it unrecoverable. This inaction can prejudice the investigation and fail to meet the professional obligation to conduct timely and effective forensic analysis when required, potentially violating the CFSP duty of diligence. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. 1. Identify the legal and regulatory framework governing the investigation and evidence handling, e.g., U.S. federal laws, departmental policies. 2. Assess the urgency and nature of the evidence required, considering the potential for data volatility. 3. Consult with legal counsel and investigative leads to obtain proper authorization and define the scope of the forensic examination. 4. Prioritize evidence preservation techniques that maintain data integrity and chain of custody. 5. Document all actions meticulously. 6. Conduct the forensic analysis in a manner that is both thorough and compliant with all legal and ethical standards. Question 6. The monitoring system demonstrates unusual outbound traffic patterns originating from a critical network router, suggesting a potential unauthorized access or data exfiltration event. As a certified forensic security professional, CFSP, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action? Option A. Shut down the entire network segment where the router is located to prevent any further data loss or unauthorized access. Option B. Directly access the router's command line interface and attempt to block the suspicious traffic by modifying its access control lists without further documentation or notification. Option C. Immediately isolate the router from the network and begin a forensic analysis of its logs and configuration to determine the nature and scope of the suspicious activity. Option D. Publicly announce the potential security incident to all employees to ensure awareness and encourage vigilance. The correct answer is C. Immediately isolate the router from the network and begin a forensic analysis of its logs and configuration to determine the nature and scope of the suspicious activity. Explanation. This scenario presents a significant ethical and professional challenge for a certified forensic security professional, CFSP. The core dilemma lies in balancing the immediate need to address a potential security breach with the legal and ethical obligations regarding data privacy and the proper handling of evidence. The CFSP must act decisively to protect the organization while adhering strictly to the established regulatory framework and ethical guidelines governing forensic investigations. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process that prioritizes containment and investigation without compromising the integrity of potential evidence or violating privacy regulations. This includes immediate notification of relevant internal stakeholders, such as legal counsel and management, and initiating a controlled investigation. This approach aligns with best practices in digital forensics, which emphasize preserving the chain of custody, ensuring data integrity, and operating within legal boundaries. Adherence to the CFSP Code of Ethics and relevant cybersecurity laws, e.g., those pertaining to unauthorized access and data breach notification, is paramount. Incorrect approaches would involve actions that bypass established protocols, potentially leading to legal repercussions, loss of evidence, or reputational damage. For instance, directly accessing and modifying the router's configuration without proper authorization or documentation could be seen as an unauthorized intrusion or tampering with evidence, violating principles of forensic integrity and potentially contravening laws related to unauthorized access. Similarly, immediately shutting down the affected network segment without a clear understanding of the scope or impact could disrupt critical business operations and destroy volatile evidence. Disclosing the incident to external parties without proper authorization or a defined incident response plan would violate confidentiality agreements and could lead to panic or misinformation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the organization's incident response plan, a thorough knowledge of applicable laws and regulations, and a commitment to ethical conduct. Professionals should always seek to document every action taken, consult with legal counsel when in doubt, and prioritize a measured, evidence-based response over hasty, potentially damaging actions. Question 7. Benchmark analysis indicates that a live system exhibits unusual network activity and intermittent performance degradation. As a certified forensic security professional, CFSP, what is the most appropriate initial risk assessment approach for memory forensics, focusing on process identification and rootkit detection to mitigate potential threats? Option A. Focus solely on identifying processes with non-standard naming conventions and those consuming the highest CPU or memory resources. Option B. Immediately terminate all processes that appear to be system-critical, regardless of their behavior, to prevent further system compromise. Option C. Prioritize the analysis of processes exhibiting anomalous behavior, unusual resource utilization, or known malicious signatures, followed by a deeper investigation into suspicious network connections and file system interactions. Option D. Ignore any processes that appear to be legitimate system services, even if they display unusual network activity, to avoid disrupting critical system functions. The correct answer is C. Prioritize the analysis of processes exhibiting anomalous behavior, unusual resource utilization, or known malicious signatures, followed by a deeper investigation into suspicious network connections and file system interactions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the dynamic and ephemeral nature of RAM. Forensic analysts must quickly and accurately identify malicious processes and potential rootkits before they are terminated or altered by system activity or the attacker. The risk assessment aspect requires prioritizing investigative efforts based on the potential impact of identified threats and the likelihood of their presence, all while adhering to strict forensic procedures to maintain data integrity and admissibility. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic risk assessment of identified processes based on their behavior, resource utilization, and known malicious signatures. This aligns with best professional practices in digital forensics, which mandate a methodical and evidence-based approach. By prioritizing the analysis of suspicious processes, the analyst maximizes the chances of uncovering active threats and their associated artifacts, thereby mitigating potential further compromise. This is ethically sound as it focuses resources on the most critical threats and regulatorily compliant by ensuring a thorough and documented investigation. Incorrect approaches analysis, an approach that solely focuses on identifying processes with unusual names or those consuming excessive resources, without further behavioral analysis or signature matching, is professionally flawed. This can lead to false positives, wasting valuable time and resources on benign processes, and potentially overlooking sophisticated threats that exhibit subtle, malicious behavior. Ethically, it represents an incomplete investigation. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore processes that appear to be system-critical, even if they exhibit anomalous behavior. While caution is warranted, a risk assessment should include these processes, as attackers frequently masquerade as legitimate system components to evade detection. Failing to investigate them is a significant regulatory and ethical failure, as it allows potential threats to remain unaddressed. Finally, an approach that prioritizes the immediate termination of all suspicious processes without proper forensic imaging or analysis is critically flawed. This destroys crucial volatile evidence, rendering subsequent analysis impossible and violating fundamental forensic principles. This constitutes a severe regulatory and ethical breach, compromising the integrity of the investigation and any potential legal proceedings. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a layered risk assessment strategy. This begins with a broad sweep of running processes, followed by a deeper dive into those exhibiting suspicious characteristics, unusual parent-child relationships, network connections, file access patterns, or resource usage. Signature-based detection and behavioral analysis are then applied. The decision to investigate further, isolate, or terminate a process must be based on a documented risk assessment, prioritizing the preservation of evidence and the identification of the most significant threats. Question 8. Benchmark analysis indicates that in digital forensic investigations, the admissibility of recovered data hinges on rigorous adherence to established legal standards. A certified forensic security professional, CFSP, has successfully recovered critical financial transaction logs from a suspect's compromised server. The logs appear to contain evidence of fraudulent activity. However, the forensic analyst who performed the recovery also made several annotations directly on the original drive's label, and the chain of custody documentation is incomplete, lacking specific timestamps for certain transfers. The prosecution is eager to present these logs as evidence. What is the most appropriate course of action for the CFSP to ensure the admissibility of this evidence? Option A. Obtain a sworn affidavit from the analyst stating that the data was recovered accurately and that no tampering occurred, and then submit this affidavit along with the recovered logs to the prosecution. Option B. Proceed with presenting the logs as evidence, arguing that the annotations on the drive are minor and the incomplete chain of custody is a procedural oversight that does not affect the authenticity of the recovered data itself. Option C. Immediately submit the recovered logs and the original drive to the prosecution, emphasizing the critical nature of the findings, and advise the prosecution to address any chain of custody or annotation concerns with the analyst. Option D. Advise the prosecution that due to the potential compromise of evidence integrity and the incomplete chain of custody, the recovered logs may be inadmissible. Recommend a reacquisition of the data using a forensically sound method with meticulous documentation, and ensure the analyst is prepared to qualify as an expert witness. The correct answer is C. Immediately submit the recovered logs and the original drive to the prosecution, emphasizing the critical nature of the findings, and advise the prosecution to address any chain of custody or annotation concerns with the analyst. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in forensic security investigations, where digital evidence is crucial, but its integrity is questioned due to potential mishandling. The professional challenge lies in navigating the strict legal standards for evidence admissibility, specifically the rules of evidence governing digital data and the requirements for expert witness testimony, to ensure the evidence can be presented in court without being challenged on grounds of authenticity or reliability. Failure to adhere to these standards can lead to the exclusion of critical evidence, jeopardizing the investigation and potential prosecution. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting the chain of custody for the digital evidence from the moment of acquisition. This includes detailed logs of who accessed the evidence, when, where, and for what purpose, as well as employing forensic imaging techniques that create bit-for-bit copies of the original storage media, preserving its integrity. Furthermore, ensuring that the forensic analyst possesses the requisite qualifications, experience, and certifications to be considered a credible expert witness under the relevant legal framework, e.g., Daubert or Fry standards, depending on the jurisdiction, though for CFSP, we assume a U.S. federal or state court context governed by the federal rules of evidence is paramount. The expert must be prepared to testify about their methodology, findings, and the scientific validity of their conclusions, demonstrating that the evidence was collected, analyzed, and preserved in a manner that maintains its evidentiary value and is free from tampering or alteration. This aligns with the principles of due process and the fundamental right to a fair trial, ensuring that only reliable and relevant evidence is considered. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to present the original storage media directly to the prosecution without creating forensic images or maintaining a detailed chain of custody. This violates the principle of preserving evidence integrity. The original media is susceptible to accidental alteration or contamination, and without a documented chain of custody, its authenticity and reliability can be easily challenged, leading to its exclusion under rules of evidence that require proof of authenticity and prevention of spoliation. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the technical findings of the forensic analysis, without ensuring the analyst meets the legal criteria for expert witness testimony. If the analyst lacks the necessary qualifications, experience, or if their methodology is not scientifically sound or generally accepted within the relevant field, their testimony may be deemed inadmissible. This would prevent the expert's findings from being presented to the court, rendering the collected digital evidence effectively useless for prosecution, as the prosecution would be unable to establish the relevance and reliability of the data. A third incorrect approach would be to assume that because the data was recovered, it is automatically admissible. This overlooks the critical legal hurdles of authentication and the expert witness requirements. Admissibility is not merely about data recovery. It is about demonstrating that the recovered data is what it purports to be and that its integrity has been maintained throughout the investigation, and that the expert presenting it is qualified to do so. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a proactive and meticulous approach to evidence handling. This involves understanding the specific jurisdictional rules of evidence and case law pertaining to digital forensics and expert testimony. A robust chain of custody protocol, coupled with forensically sound acquisition and analysis techniques, forms the bedrock of evidence admissibility. When preparing for expert testimony, a forensic professional must anticipate potential challenges to their methodology, qualifications, and conclusions, and be prepared to articulate the scientific basis for their work clearly and concisely. This systematic approach ensures that digital evidence is preserved and presented in a manner that withstands legal scrutiny, thereby supporting the integrity of the investigative and judicial processes. Question 9. The risk matrix shows a high probability of evidence tampering or loss during the initial seizure and transport of digital devices from a crime scene to a forensic laboratory. A certified forensic security professional, CFSP, is tasked with securing several laptops and mobile phones. Which of the following actions best upholds the chain of custody requirements for digital evidence? Option A. Photograph each device at the scene and then hand them directly to the lab technician without any immediate packaging or logging. Option B. Place the devices in a standard cardboard box for transport and verbally confirm the transfer of custody with the responding officer. Option C. Transport the devices to the forensic lab as quickly as possible and log them upon arrival, relying on the lab's internal tracking system for initial handling. Option D. Immediately place each device into an anti-static evidence bag, seal it, and complete a detailed evidence log entry at the scene, noting the condition of each device and the time of seizure. The correct answer is D. Immediately place each device into an anti-static evidence bag, seal it, and complete a detailed evidence log entry at the scene, noting the condition of each device and the time of seizure. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics: the potential for evidence contamination or alteration during the initial seizure and transport of digital devices. The professional challenge lies in balancing the urgency of securing potential evidence with the absolute necessity of adhering to strict chain of custody protocols to maintain its admissibility in legal proceedings. Failure to do so can render critical evidence useless, impacting investigations and potential prosecutions. The CFSP professional must exercise meticulous judgment to ensure every step taken is documented and defensible. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediate, secure packaging of the devices in a manner that prevents tampering or environmental damage, followed by a detailed, contemporaneous log entry. This aligns directly with the principles of maintaining the integrity of digital evidence as mandated by the Certified Forensic Security Professional (CFSP) framework, which emphasizes documentation and adherence to established handling procedures. Specifically, this approach ensures that the physical state of the evidence is preserved from the moment of seizure, and that a clear, auditable record of its handling begins immediately. This proactive documentation is crucial for establishing a robust chain of custody, demonstrating due diligence, and ensuring the evidence's admissibility in court under relevant legal standards, such as those governing evidence handling in digital investigations. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves delaying the logging process until arrival at the forensic lab. This creates a significant gap in the chain of custody, during which the evidence is unrecorded and potentially vulnerable to unauthorized access or alteration. This failure directly contravenes the CFSP requirement for immediate and continuous documentation of evidence handling. Another incorrect approach, which is to transport the devices without any initial protective packaging, exposes them to physical damage or contamination, compromising their integrity. This violates the fundamental principle of preserving evidence in its original state. Finally, relying on verbal confirmation of evidence transfer without written documentation is a critical failure. The CFSP framework, like all robust forensic standards, demands written, verifiable records for every transfer of evidence to maintain accountability and prevent disputes about its handling. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by prioritizing immediate, secure containment and meticulous, real-time documentation. The decision-making process should involve a mental checklist. Is the evidence secured from tampering? Is its physical state preserved? Has a detailed log entry been created immediately? Is this log entry comprehensive and accurate? This systematic approach, grounded in the CFSP emphasis on integrity and documentation, ensures that the chain of custody is established and maintained from the earliest possible point, thereby safeguarding the evidence's evidentiary value. Question 10. Operational review demonstrates that a critical incident has occurred on a live Windows workstation, and immediate forensic analysis is required. The primary objective is to understand the system's activity at the moment of the incident. Which of the following approaches best optimizes the process for acquiring and preserving potential evidence from this live system? Option A. Proceed directly to creating a forensically sound disk image of the storage media without any prior data acquisition from the live system. Option B. Acquire volatile data from the live system using forensically sound tools and document the process meticulously before creating a forensically sound disk image of the storage media. Option C. Immediately shut down the workstation to perform a forensically sound disk image of the entire storage media. Option D. Utilize user-provided information about currently running processes and then create a forensically sound disk image of the storage media. The correct answer is C. Immediately shut down the workstation to perform a forensically sound disk image of the entire storage media. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics, balancing the need for timely evidence acquisition with the imperative to maintain data integrity and adhere to established forensic protocols. The pressure to deliver findings quickly can tempt practitioners to bypass crucial steps, potentially compromising the admissibility and reliability of the evidence. The professional challenge lies in navigating these competing demands while upholding the rigorous standards expected of a certified forensic security professional, CFSP. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a systematic and documented process for acquiring volatile data. This aligns with the fundamental principles of digital forensics, which mandate that evidence be collected in a manner that preserves its integrity and is reproducible. Specifically, acquiring volatile data, like running processes, network connections, and memory contents, from a live system before imaging the disk is critical because this information is transient and will be lost upon system shutdown or reboot. Documenting the exact commands used, the timestamps of acquisition, and the tools employed ensures chain of custody and allows for verification of the process. This meticulous approach is directly supported by CFSP ethical guidelines and best practices, which prioritize accuracy, objectivity, and the preservation of evidence integrity. Adherence to these principles is paramount for ensuring that findings are legally sound and defensible in any subsequent proceedings. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately shutting down the system to perform a disk image. This is problematic because it destroys volatile data that could be crucial for understanding the system's state at the time of the incident. This failure to preserve potentially relevant evidence violates the forensic principle of collecting all available evidence and can lead to incomplete or misleading conclusions, undermining the professional's duty of care. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with a disk image without first documenting the system's current state or acquiring volatile data. This bypasses essential steps in a live forensic examination. The lack of documentation regarding volatile data acquisition means that critical transient information is lost and cannot be accounted for, raising serious questions about the thoroughness and integrity of the forensic process. This directly contravenes CFSP standards for comprehensive evidence collection and documentation. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on user-provided information about running processes without independent forensic acquisition. This introduces a significant risk of bias and incompleteness. Forensic professionals are obligated to independently verify and collect evidence, not to rely on potentially inaccurate or incomplete third-party accounts. This approach fails to meet the standard of objective, verifiable evidence collection required by professional forensic practice. Professional reasoning. When faced with a situation requiring the examination of a live system, a forensic professional must first prioritize the acquisition of volatile data. This involves using forensically sound tools and methodologies to capture information such as running processes, network connections, logged-in users, and system memory. Each step of this acquisition process must be meticulously documented, including the tools used, their versions, the commands executed, and the timestamps. Following the acquisition of volatile data, a forensically sound disk image should be created. This image serves as a bit-for-bit copy of the storage media, preserving the non-volatile data. Throughout the entire process, maintaining a strict chain of custody and adhering to established forensic protocols are non-negotiable. Professionals should always consult relevant CFSP guidelines and legal precedents to ensure their actions are both technically sound and legally admissible. Question 11. The assessment process reveals a series of unusual network connection attempts and several recently modified system configuration files on a critical server. The forensic security professional is tasked with analyzing this data to determine if a security breach has occurred and to identify the nature of any unauthorized activity. Which of the following analytical approaches best aligns with the principles of forensic security analysis and regulatory compliance for identifying relevant information? Option A. Prioritizing the analysis of the most recent network connection attempts, assuming older connections are less relevant to the current incident, and making assumptions about the attacker's intent based on common attack patterns. Option B. Conducting a superficial review of all available logs, looking for obvious signs of intrusion without a structured methodology or detailed correlation of disparate data sources. Option C. Correlating network traffic logs with user authentication records and examining system event logs for anomalies, while cross-referencing file modification timestamps with the network connection, attempts to establish a timeline of events. Option D. Focusing exclusively on the recently modified system configuration files, assuming they are the primary indicators of compromise and disregarding other log sources. The correct answer is C. Correlating network traffic logs with user authentication records and examining system event logs for anomalies, while cross-referencing file modification timestamps with the network connection, attempts to establish a timeline of events. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a complex scenario where a forensic security professional must sift through a large volume of digital evidence to identify indicators of unauthorized access and potential data exfiltration. This is professionally challenging because the sheer volume of data can obscure critical details, and the potential for sophisticated evasion techniques by malicious actors requires a methodical and informed analytical approach. The professional must balance the need for thoroughness with the urgency often associated with security incidents, all while adhering to strict legal and ethical guidelines. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the systematic examination of data based on established forensic principles and relevant regulatory frameworks. This involves correlating logs from various sources, identifying anomalies that deviate from normal baseline activity, and meticulously documenting all findings. This methodical process ensures that all relevant evidence is considered, reduces the risk of overlooking critical indicators, and provides a defensible audit trail, aligning with the principles of data integrity and chain of custody mandated by forensic standards. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on readily apparent file modifications without considering network traffic logs or user authentication records represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This narrow focus could lead to missing crucial evidence of how unauthorized access was gained or how data was transferred, thereby failing to meet the professional obligation to conduct a comprehensive investigation. It also risks presenting an incomplete picture to stakeholders, potentially leading to incorrect conclusions and inadequate remediation efforts, which violates the duty of care expected of a certified forensic security professional. Another incorrect approach that involves making assumptions about the attacker's motives or methods without concrete supporting evidence is also professionally unacceptable. This speculative approach bypasses the rigorous analytical process required for forensic investigations. It can lead to biased findings and misdirected investigative efforts, undermining the credibility of the forensic analysis and potentially violating ethical guidelines that demand objectivity and evidence-based conclusions. A further incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over accuracy by only examining the most recent data entries ignores the possibility of advanced persistent threats or delayed exfiltration techniques. This haste can result in overlooking historical indicators of compromise, which are often vital for understanding the full scope of an incident. Ethically, this constitutes a failure to perform due diligence and a potential breach of professional standards that require a thorough and complete examination of all relevant evidence. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the incident's scope and objectives, followed by the development of a detailed analytical plan. This plan should outline the types of data to be examined, the tools and techniques to be employed, and the expected outcomes. Continuous evaluation of findings against the initial hypotheses and a willingness to adapt the analytical strategy based on new discoveries are crucial. Adherence to established forensic methodologies and regulatory requirements, coupled with meticulous documentation, forms the bedrock of sound professional judgment in forensic security analysis. Question 12. Stakeholder feedback indicates a need for enhanced understanding of X4 file system analysis, particularly concerning the role of journaling in forensic investigations. A forensic investigator is tasked with examining a Linux system suspected of containing evidence of unauthorized data exfiltration. The system utilizes the X4 file system. The investigator needs to determine the sequence of file creation and deletion events leading up to the suspected exfiltration. Which approach best utilizes the X4 journaling mechanism to reconstruct these events accurately and defensibly? Option A. Assume the X4 journal is corrupted and proceed with a simplified analysis of the file system without attempting to interpret journal data. Option B. Directly modify the X4 journal entries to reflect the expected sequence of events based on initial hypotheses. Option C. Ignore the X4 journal entirely, focusing solely on the inode tables and directory entries for file system analysis. Option D. Analyze the X4 journal to reconstruct metadata changes and file system operations, correlating these entries with the main file system structures to establish a timeline of file creation and deletion. The correct answer is D. Analyze the X4 journal to reconstruct metadata changes and file system operations, correlating these entries with the main file system structures to establish a timeline of file creation and deletion. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the critical nature of file system integrity in forensic investigations. The X4 file system's journaling mechanism is designed to ensure data consistency and recoverability, but its analysis requires a nuanced understanding to avoid misinterpretation or data corruption. The challenge lies in accurately interpreting journal entries and their relationship to the main file system structures without introducing bias or compromising the integrity of the evidence. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between active journal data, historical journal data, and the actual file system metadata. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the preservation and accurate interpretation of digital evidence, adhering to established forensic principles. By focusing on understanding the X4 journaling mechanism and its impact on file system analysis, a forensic investigator can accurately reconstruct file system states and identify changes. This aligns with the CFSP mandate to conduct thorough and reliable digital forensic examinations. Specifically, understanding how the journal record's metadata changes before they are committed to the main file system allows for the reconstruction of file system events, even in the event of an unexpected system shutdown. This methodical approach ensures that conclusions drawn are defensible and based on sound forensic methodology. Incorrect approaches fail to meet professional standards and can lead to compromised investigations. One incorrect approach might involve directly manipulating or overriding journal data, which would violate the principle of evidence preservation and could irrevocably alter the forensic state of the file system. This is a direct ethical and regulatory failure, as it demonstrates a lack of due diligence and could lead to the destruction of critical evidence. Another incorrect approach could be to ignore the journal entirely, assuming it is irrelevant. This would be a failure to understand the fundamental workings of the X4 file system and would lead to an incomplete and potentially inaccurate analysis, as the journal provides crucial information about file system operations and recovery. This demonstrates a lack of technical competence and adherence to best practices in digital forensics. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the target file system's architecture and its specific features, such as journaling. Before commencing any analysis, investigators should consult relevant documentation and established forensic methodologies. They should prioritize non-intrusive examination techniques and always work on forensic images rather than live systems. When encountering complex file system features like journaling, a systematic approach involving understanding the purpose of the journal, how it records transactions, and how to interpret its contents in conjunction with the main file system structures is paramount. This ensures that the analysis is both comprehensive and defensible. Question 13. System analysis indicates a potential security breach on a Linux server. As a certified forensic security professional, CFSP, you are tasked with investigating the incident. Your initial access to the server is granted with broad administrative privileges, but no specific limitations on data access are provided in the incident response plan. You suspect that unauthorized user accounts may have been created, malicious cron jobs scheduled, and network configurations altered to facilitate the breach. What is the most ethically and legally sound approach to gathering evidence related to user accounts, cron jobs, and network configurations? Option A. Immediately proceed to examine all user account details, review all cron job entries across the system, and analyze all network configuration files to identify any anomalies. Option B. Limit your investigation to publicly accessible system logs and network traffic data, avoiding direct examination of user account files, cron job schedules, and detailed network configuration settings to maintain user privacy. Option C. Begin by analyzing system-wide network configurations and then proceed to examine cron jobs, deferring the analysis of individual user accounts until a later stage of the investigation. Option D. Request specific authorization from the incident response lead or legal counsel detailing the scope of user accounts, cron jobs, and network configurations to be examined before proceeding with the analysis. The correct answer is A. Immediately proceed to examine all user account details, review all cron job entries across the system, and analyze all network configuration files to identify any anomalies. Explanation: This scenario presents a common ethical dilemma in digital forensics, particularly within the context of the Certified Forensic Security Professional (CFSP) framework, which emphasizes adherence to legal and ethical standards. The challenge lies in balancing the need for thorough investigation with the protection of user privacy and the integrity of the system. A forensic investigator must operate within the defined scope of the investigation and adhere strictly to established protocols and legal authorizations. The correct approach prioritizes obtaining explicit authorization before examining sensitive user data and system configurations. This aligns with fundamental principles of digital forensics and privacy law, ensuring that the investigation remains lawful and ethical. By seeking proper authorization, the investigator demonstrates respect for user rights and avoids potential legal repercussions or the compromise of the investigation's admissibility in legal proceedings. This methodical approach upholds the integrity of the forensic process and the professional standing of the investigator. An incorrect approach that involves immediately accessing and analyzing all user accounts, cron jobs, network configurations without explicit authorization is professionally unacceptable. This action constitutes a breach of privacy and could violate data protection regulations. Such unauthorized access can lead to the discovery of irrelevant information, potentially tainting the investigation, and may result in legal challenges regarding the evidence's admissibility. Furthermore, it demonstrates a disregard for established forensic procedures and ethical guidelines, undermining the credibility of the investigator and the organization. Another incorrect approach, which involves only examining publicly accessible information and ignoring user-specific configurations, is also flawed. Respecting privacy is crucial. A forensic investigation often requires delving into system configurations and user-specific data to uncover the root cause of an incident or to identify malicious activity. Limiting the scope to only publicly accessible information would likely result in an incomplete and ineffective investigation, failing to meet the objectives for which the forensic examination was initiated. This approach neglects the investigative mandate and the potential for critical evidence residing within user accounts or system configurations. A professional decision-making process in such situations involves a clear understanding of the investigation's scope, the legal and regulatory framework governing the examination, in this case, the CFSP jurisdiction, and the principles of digital forensics. The investigator must always operate under a defined mandate, which typically includes obtaining appropriate legal authority or authorization before accessing sensitive data. If the scope is unclear or requires access to potentially sensitive information, the investigator must consult with legal counsel or the authorizing authority to clarify the boundaries and obtain necessary permissions. This ensures that all actions are lawful, ethical, and contribute effectively to the investigation's objectives. Question 14. Assessment of a digital forensic investigator's actions when faced with a critical incident requiring immediate data retrieval from a suspect's laptop, where the standard forensic imaging process is estimated to take several hours, potentially delaying the apprehension of an ongoing threat. The investigator is considering directly accessing files on the live system to extract time-sensitive information before performing a full forensic image. What is the most appropriate decision-making framework to follow in this situation, adhering strictly to digital forensics fundamentals and professional ethical obligations? Option A. Create a quick, non-forensic copy of the suspect's laptop's active memory and then proceed with direct file access on the suspect's laptop, believing this balances speed and data preservation. Option B. Proceed with the full forensic imaging of the suspect's laptop as per standard procedure, prioritizing evidence integrity over the immediate retrieval of potentially time-sensitive data, and inform relevant authorities of the delay. Option C. Immediately extract the necessary files from the live system to mitigate the ongoing threat, documenting the actions taken and the rationale for bypassing the standard imaging procedure, and then proceed with a full forensic image as soon as feasible. Option D. Directly access and analyze files on the live system without imaging, assuming the urgency of the situation justifies the risk to evidence integrity, and create a forensic image later if time permits. The correct answer is C. Immediately extract the necessary files from the live system to mitigate the ongoing threat, documenting the actions taken and the rationale for bypassing the standard imaging procedure, and then proceed with a full forensic image as soon as feasible. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics where the integrity of evidence is paramount, but the urgency of an investigation may tempt a practitioner to bypass established protocols. The practitioner must balance the need for timely information with the absolute requirement to maintain the chain of custody and the forensically sound nature of the evidence. Failure to do so can render the evidence inadmissible in legal proceedings, undermining the entire investigation and potentially leading to a miscarriage of justice. The Certified Forensic Security Professional, CFSP, designation implies a commitment to upholding the highest standards of practice, which includes meticulous adherence to established procedures. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves documenting the situation, obtaining explicit authorization for any deviation from standard imaging procedures, and ensuring that the deviation itself is documented and justified. This aligns with the core principles of digital forensics, emphasizing integrity, reproducibility, and admissibility. Specifically, it adheres to the CFSP implied commitment to best practices, which are often codified in professional standards and ethical guidelines that prioritize evidence integrity. Documenting the rationale for any deviation ensures transparency and allows for scrutiny by legal professionals and opposing counsel. Obtaining authorization demonstrates accountability and a commitment to following established organizational or legal protocols. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the analysis without imaging the drive, believing the urgency outweighs the need for a forensically sound copy. This directly violates the fundamental principle of preserving original evidence. The CFSP framework, like most forensic standards, mandates creating a bit-for-bit copy, image, of the original media before any analysis is performed. This ensures that the original evidence remains unaltered, protecting its integrity and admissibility. Failing to image the drive means the original data could be inadvertently modified or destroyed during analysis, rendering it useless in court. This is a clear ethical and professional failure. Another incorrect approach is to image the drive, but fail to document the process or any potential issues encountered during imaging. This compromises the chain of custody and the reproducibility of the forensic process. The CFSP requires meticulous documentation at every stage of an investigation, including the imaging process. Without proper documentation, it is impossible to prove that the evidence was handled correctly and that the resulting image is an accurate representation of the original drive. This lack of transparency can lead to challenges regarding the evidence's authenticity and reliability. A third incorrect approach is to create an image, but then immediately begin analysis on the original drive, assuming the image is sufficient. This again risks altering the original evidence. While an image is created, the subsequent analysis on the original media negates the purpose of creating a forensically sound copy. The analysis should always be performed on the forensic image, not the original source media, to maintain the integrity of the original evidence. This demonstrates a misunderstanding of core forensic principles and a disregard for evidence preservation. Professional reasoning. Professionals in digital forensics must adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes evidence integrity and adherence to established protocols. When faced with time constraints or unusual circumstances, the process should involve 1. Identifying the potential deviation from standard procedure. 2. Assessing the impact of the deviation on evidence integrity and admissibility. 3. Consulting relevant organizational policies, legal requirements, and professional ethical guidelines, such as those implied by the CFSP certification. 4. Seeking explicit authorization for any proposed deviation, clearly documenting the rationale and the proposed steps. 5. Meticulously documenting all actions taken, including any deviations and their justifications. This structured approach ensures that decisions are defensible, ethical, and uphold the highest standards of forensic practice. Question 15. Comparative studies suggest that the effectiveness of digital forensic investigations hinges on the meticulous preservation and analysis of system artifacts. In a scenario involving a suspected unauthorized access to a corporate network, an investigator is tasked with examining a Windows workstation. The investigator has identified prefetch files, shortcut, LNK files, and other system artifacts as potentially crucial evidence. Considering the volatile nature of these artifacts and the legal requirements for admissibility, Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of digital forensic science and the standards expected of a certified forensic security professional, CFSP? Option A. Focus exclusively on analyzing prefetch files and shortcut files, disregarding other system artifacts that might provide additional context or corroboration for the findings. Option B. Rely solely on automated scanning tools to extract prefetch and shortcut data, assuming the tool's output is definitive without further validation or contextual analysis. Option C. Create a bit-for-bit forensic image of the workstation's hard drive, then use validated forensic tools to analyze the prefetch files, shortcut files, and other relevant system artifacts from the forensic image, ensuring all steps are meticulously documented. Option D. Immediately analyze prefetch files and shortcut files directly on the live system, using readily available forensic tools to quickly identify user activity and program execution. The correct answer is D. Immediately analyze prefetch files and shortcut files directly on the live system, using readily available forensic tools to quickly identify user activity and program execution. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because the forensic investigator must balance the need for thoroughness in digital evidence collection with the potential for data alteration and the legal admissibility of that evidence. The rapid evolution of operating systems and application functionalities means that standard forensic methodologies must be constantly reviewed and adapted. The specific artifacts mentioned, prefetch, shortcuts, and other system artifacts, are volatile and can be easily overwritten or modified by normal system operations, or even by the act of forensic examination itself if not performed correctly. The investigator must demonstrate a deep understanding of how these artifacts are created, maintained, and what constitutes their integrity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the preservation of digital evidence integrity, a cornerstone of forensic investigations. By focusing on the least intrusive methods first, such as imaging the drive before any artifact analysis, the investigator minimizes the risk of altering the original data. The subsequent analysis of prefetch files, shortcut, LNK files, and other system artifacts, like jump lists, shellbags, and registry entries related to file execution, using validated forensic tools and techniques ensures that the findings are accurate and defensible. This adherence to established forensic principles, often codified in professional standards and guidelines relevant to the Certified Forensic Security Professional, CFSP certification, ensures that the evidence collected is reliable and admissible in legal proceedings. The CFSP framework emphasizes a systematic and documented approach to evidence handling, ensuring chain of custody and integrity. Correct approach is analysis, an approach that immediately begins analyzing prefetch files and shortcuts directly on the live system without prior imaging is professionally unacceptable. This is because accessing and analyzing these files on a running system can alter their timestamps, modify their contents, or even delete them, thereby compromising their integrity. This violates fundamental forensic principles and could lead to the exclusion of evidence in court. It also fails to adhere to the documentation and chain of custody requirements inherent in the CFSP certification, as the original state of the evidence is not preserved. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on automated tools without understanding the underlying mechanisms of prefetch file generation or shortcut creation. While automated tools are efficient, a forensic professional must be able to validate their output and understand potential limitations or false positives. Without this deeper understanding, the investigator might misinterpret the data or fail to identify subtle indicators of malicious activity. This lack of critical analysis and validation is a failure to meet the rigorous standards expected of a CFSP. A third incorrect approach involves selectively collecting only prefetch files and shortcuts, ignoring other relevant system artifacts that might corroborate or contradict findings. Digital forensics requires a holistic view. For instance, shellbags can provide context for user activity and file access, which is crucial when analyzing prefetch and shortcut data. Ignoring these related artifacts leads to an incomplete investigation and potentially flawed conclusions, failing to meet the comprehensive investigative mandate of a forensic professional. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic, documented, and integrity-focused approach. This involves 1. understanding the specific jurisdiction's legal framework and evidentiary rules. For the CFSP, this would involve adhering to principles aligned with common law jurisdictions and established digital forensic best practices. 2. Prioritizing evidence preservation. Always create a forensic image of the storage media before conducting any analysis. 3. Utilizing validated forensic tools and methodologies. Ensure that the tools used are known to be reliable and that the methods employed are accepted within the forensic community. 4. Documenting every step. Maintain detailed notes of all actions taken, including the tools used, their versions, and the parameters applied. 5. Corroborating findings. Analyze multiple artifacts to build a comprehensive picture and validate conclusions. 6. Maintaining chain of custody. Ensure that the integrity of the evidence is maintained from collection to presentation. Question 16. The efficiency study reveals that a critical network segment is experiencing unusual traffic patterns, indicative of a potential advanced persistent threat activity. The security team has detected anomalous data exfiltration attempts and unauthorized access to sensitive databases. As a certified forensic security professional, CFSP, what is the most appropriate initial course of action to balance immediate threat mitigation with the imperative of preserving forensic evidence? Option A. Immediately isolate the affected network segment to prevent further data exfiltration and unauthorized access, while simultaneously initiating a forensic image acquisition of the compromised systems. Option B. Alert all employees about the potential breach and instruct them to change their passwords immediately to mitigate further compromise. Option C. Initiate a full system rollback to a known good state across all potentially affected servers to restore normal operations as quickly as possible. Option D. Begin an immediate deep packet inspection of all network traffic to identify the source IP address of the attacker and gather real-time intelligence on their methods. The correct answer is A. Immediately isolate the affected network segment to prevent further data exfiltration and unauthorized access, while simultaneously initiating a forensic image acquisition of the compromised systems. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because the Certified Forensic Security Professional, CFSP, must balance the immediate need to contain a potential network intrusion with the long-term implications of evidence preservation and regulatory compliance. The pressure to act quickly to mitigate damage can conflict with the meticulous requirements of forensic investigation. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the integrity of the digital evidence while initiating containment measures. This aligns with the principles of digital forensics, which mandate that evidence must be collected and analyzed in a manner that ensures its admissibility in legal or disciplinary proceedings. Specifically, it adheres to the CFSP ethical obligations to conduct investigations with due diligence and to uphold the standards of evidence handling, which are implicitly governed by the overarching regulatory framework for forensic security professionals. This approach ensures that the investigation is both effective in stopping the intrusion and legally sound. An incorrect approach that involves immediate system shutdown without proper imaging or documentation fails to preserve crucial forensic data. This is a regulatory failure because it violates established protocols for evidence handling, potentially rendering the collected information unusable in a legal context. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the principles of forensic investigation. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on identifying the attacker's origin without considering the nature of the malicious activity or its impact on the network is also professionally unacceptable. This represents a failure to conduct a comprehensive investigation as required by forensic standards. It prioritizes a narrow objective over the broader need to understand the scope and impact of the intrusion, which is essential for effective remediation and future prevention. A third incorrect approach that involves sharing preliminary, unverified findings with unauthorized parties before a thorough analysis is complete is a significant ethical and potential regulatory failure. This breaches confidentiality, can lead to misinformation, and compromises the integrity of the ongoing investigation. Forensic professionals are bound by strict confidentiality agreements and ethical guidelines that prohibit the premature disclosure of sensitive information. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Assess the immediate threat Determine the severity and scope of the suspected intrusion. 2. Prioritize evidence preservation. Implement measures to secure and image affected systems before any significant changes are made. 3. Follow established protocols. Adhere strictly to the CFSP documented procedures for incident response and digital forensics. 4. Document all actions. Maintain a detailed log of every step taken, including timestamps and justifications. 5. Consult relevant policies and regulations. Ensure all actions are compliant with the specific regulatory framework governing CFSP. 6. Communicate appropriately. Share information only with authorized personnel and through designated channels. Question 17. To address the challenge of a critical security breach where immediate forensic analysis of compromised systems is desired to understand the attack vector, which of the following actions best aligns with the regulatory framework and forensic science principles for a certified forensic security professional, CFSP? Option A. Proceed with forensic imaging of the compromised systems without establishing a chain of custody, assuming the internal team can later reconstruct the handling process. Option B. Immediately begin forensic analysis of the compromised systems using specialized tools, documenting observations in a personal notebook, and verbally briefing the incident response team on initial findings. Option C. Secure the compromised systems, photograph their current state, meticulously document the collection process, and initiate a formal chain of custody log before any forensic imaging or analysis commences. Option D. Prioritize the restoration of compromised systems to operational status, collecting only readily accessible logs and deferring detailed forensic examination until after the systems are back online. Correct answer is B. Immediately begin forensic analysis of the compromised systems using specialized tools, documenting observations in a personal notebook, and verbally briefing the incident response team on initial findings. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the need for timely evidence processing and the absolute requirement for maintaining the integrity and admissibility of forensic evidence within the Certified Forensic Security Professional, CFSP, regulatory framework. The CFSP designation implies adherence to specific legal and ethical standards governing forensic investigations, which are paramount for ensuring justice. The core difficulty lies in balancing the urgency of a security incident with the meticulous, documented procedures necessary to prevent contamination, chain of custody breaches, or other issues that could render evidence inadmissible in a legal proceeding. Careful judgment is required to ensure that investigative momentum does not compromise the scientific validity and legal defensibility of the findings. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the foundational principles of forensic science and the specific regulatory requirements governing evidence handling. This approach emphasizes meticulous documentation, adherence to established protocols for evidence collection and preservation, and the immediate initiation of a formal chain of custody. These actions are directly mandated by the CFSP governing regulations, which stress the importance of maintaining evidence integrity from collection to presentation in court. By following these rigorous steps, the forensic security professional ensures that the evidence collected is scientifically sound, legally admissible, and can withstand scrutiny, thereby upholding the principles of due process and the integrity of the investigation. An incorrect approach that involves immediate analysis without proper documentation and chain of custody initiation fails to meet the CFSP regulatory obligations. This failure constitutes a significant ethical and legal breach, as it jeopardizes the admissibility of the evidence. The regulatory framework for CFSP explicitly mandates a documented chain of custody to prevent unauthorized access or tampering. Without this, the evidence's provenance is questionable, undermining its reliability. Another incorrect approach, such as relying on informal notes or verbal communication for critical evidence handling details, also violates CFSP standards. These methods lack the formal, verifiable record-keeping required by the regulations, making it impossible to demonstrate the evidence's integrity and potentially leading to its exclusion from legal proceedings. Such omissions can result in a compromised investigation, wrongful accusations, or the acquittal of guilty parties, directly contravening the professional responsibilities of a CFSP. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with an immediate assessment of the incident's impact on evidence. The forensic security professional must then consult and strictly adhere to the established protocols outlined in the CFSP regulatory framework and relevant legal precedents. This involves prioritizing the secure collection, proper packaging, and immediate documentation of all potential evidence, including the initiation of the chain of custody. Any deviation from these established procedures must be justified and documented, with a clear understanding of the potential legal ramifications. The guiding principle should always be the preservation of evidence integrity and admissibility, even if it means a temporary delay in analytical processes. Question 18. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential compromise of sensitive customer data on a critical server. As a certified forensic security professional, CFSP, what is the most appropriate initial action to take to ensure the integrity of potential evidence while initiating an investigation? Option A. Immediately initiate a forensically sound disk image of the affected server, ensuring all actions are meticulously documented and chain of custody is maintained. Option B. Proceed with a live analysis of the server to quickly identify the source of the compromise and contain the threat. Option C. Wipe the affected server to prevent further data exfiltration and ensure a clean system for future operations. Option D. Forward the raw forensic image to the marketing department for immediate analysis to understand customer impact. The correct answer is A. Immediately initiate a forensically sound disk image of the affected server, ensuring all actions are meticulously documented and chain of custody is maintained. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the need for rapid incident response and the strict adherence to legal and ethical protocols in digital forensics. The Certified Forensic Security Professional, CFSP, must balance the urgency of containing a potential data breach with the imperative to preserve evidence integrity and maintain chain of custody, all within the defined regulatory framework. Failure to do so can compromise the investigation, lead to inadmissible evidence, and result in significant legal and reputational damage. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes the preservation of evidence integrity and adherence to established forensic procedures. This aligns with the core principles of digital forensics and the regulatory expectations for a CFSP. By documenting all actions meticulously, maintaining a strict chain of custody, and ensuring that any data acquisition is performed using forensically sound methods, the professional upholds the reliability and admissibility of the evidence. This approach is mandated by the principles of digital evidence handling, which are foundational to the CFSP certification and its associated ethical guidelines, ensuring that investigations are conducted in a manner that is both legally defensible and scientifically sound. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately wiping or reformatting affected systems to clean them. This is a severe regulatory and ethical failure as it constitutes destruction of potential evidence, violating fundamental forensic principles and likely contravening laws related to evidence preservation. It directly undermines the investigative process and could lead to criminal charges or civil penalties. Another incorrect approach is to bypass established forensic imaging procedures and directly analyze live systems without proper documentation or justification. This risks altering volatile data, compromising the integrity of the evidence, and failing to establish a reliable chain of custody. Such actions are ethically unsound and would render any findings inadmissible in legal proceedings, violating the professional standards expected of a CFSP. A third incorrect approach is to share raw forensic data with unauthorized personnel without proper anonymization or legal authorization. This constitutes a breach of confidentiality and data privacy regulations, potentially exposing sensitive information and violating the trust placed in the forensic professional. It also risks contaminating the evidence or allowing it to be misinterpreted by individuals lacking the necessary expertise. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic, evidence-centric approach. This involves 1. Understanding the scope and nature of the incident through initial risk assessment. 2. Prioritizing evidence preservation and integrity above all else. 3. Following documented, forensically sound procedures for data acquisition and analysis. 4. Maintaining meticulous documentation and chain of custody throughout the entire process. 5. Consulting legal counsel or incident response leadership when faced with ambiguous situations or conflicting priorities. This structured decision-making process ensures compliance with regulatory requirements, ethical obligations, and best practices in digital forensics. Question 19. Quality control measures reveal a potential security incident on a Mac OS workstation. The system is currently running and there are indications of unauthorized network activity. As a certified forensic security professional, CFSP, what is the immediate priority for preserving potential evidence? Option A. Immediately shut down the Mac OS workstation. Option B. Interview the user of the Mac OS workstation about their recent activities. Option C. Begin imaging the hard drive of the Mac OS workstation. Option D. Acquire volatile data from the live Mac OS system. The correct answer is D. Acquire volatile data from the live Mac OS system. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in Mac OS forensics where the integrity of volatile data is paramount. The rapid nature of Mac OS operations means that critical evidence, such as running processes, network connections, and active user sessions, can be overwritten or lost within minutes. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for immediate data acquisition with the requirement to preserve the integrity of the system for subsequent, deeper forensic analysis. Failure to act swiftly and appropriately can lead to the irretrievable loss of crucial evidence, rendering the investigation incomplete or unreliable. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves prioritizing the acquisition of volatile data from the live Mac OS system. This is best achieved through specialized tools and techniques designed to capture this ephemeral information without altering the system state significantly. Regulatory frameworks and best practices in digital forensics, particularly those relevant to incident response and evidence preservation, mandate the capture of volatile data as a primary step. This ensures that the most transient and potentially incriminating information is secured before it is lost. For a certified forensic security professional, CFSP, adhering to these principles is critical for maintaining the admissibility and reliability of evidence. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately shutting down the Mac OS system. This action, while seemingly decisive, destroys all volatile data, including active processes, network connections, and memory contents. This directly violates forensic best practices and likely regulatory guidelines that emphasize the preservation of evidence in its most complete state. Another incorrect approach is to proceed directly to imaging the hard drive without first acquiring volatile data. While disk imaging is a crucial step, it captures static data and does not preserve the dynamic state of the system at the time of the incident. This can lead to missing critical evidence that only exists in volatile memory. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on user-provided information without independent forensic acquisition. This is insufficient as user accounts can be compromised or manipulated, and their statements may not reflect the true state of the system. Forensic professionals are ethically and regulatorily bound to conduct independent, verifiable data acquisition. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such scenarios should employ a structured incident response methodology. This typically involves identification, containment, eradication, and recovery. In the context of digital forensics, the initial phase of identification and containment heavily relies on the rapid and accurate acquisition of volatile data. A decision-making framework should prioritize actions that preserve the integrity of the evidence while gathering the most critical information first. This involves understanding the nature of the data being sought, volatile vs. static, and employing appropriate tools and techniques for each. Always consult the specific CFSP guidelines and relevant legal frameworks for mandated procedures. Question 20. The control framework reveals a potential data exfiltration event involving sensitive customer information. Before initiating full forensic imaging of all potentially affected servers and endpoints, what is the most prudent initial step a certified forensic security professional should take to guide the subsequent investigation and containment strategy? Option A. Conduct a rapid risk assessment to determine the potential business, legal, and reputational impact of the suspected exfiltration. Option B. Rely solely on automated security tools to scan for indicators of compromise and flag suspicious activity. Option C. Immediately isolate all network segments that house customer data to prevent further unauthorized access. Option D. Initiate a full forensic imaging of all servers and endpoints within the organization's network. The correct answer is A. Conduct a rapid risk assessment to determine the potential business, legal, and reputational impact of the suspected exfiltration. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a forensic security professional to balance the immediate need for data preservation with the broader organizational risk appetite and the potential for operational disruption. The discovery of a potential security incident necessitates swift action, but the nature of the incident and its potential impact on business operations must be carefully considered to avoid overreaction or underestimation of the threat. The professional must navigate the tension between thoroughness in investigation and the practicalities of business continuity, all while adhering to established forensic protocols and regulatory requirements. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a risk-based assessment of the incident's potential impact before committing significant resources or enacting drastic containment measures. This aligns with the principles of incident response and forensic investigation, which advocate for a phased approach that escalates based on the severity and scope of the incident. By first understanding the potential business, legal, and reputational ramifications, the professional can tailor the investigation and containment strategies to be both effective and proportionate. This approach ensures that resources are allocated efficiently and that the investigation does not unnecessarily disrupt critical business functions, while still meeting the obligation to investigate and remediate security incidents as mandated by general data protection principles and cybersecurity best practices, which are implicitly expected within a CFSP framework. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately isolating all affected systems and initiating a full forensic imaging of every potentially compromised device without a preliminary risk assessment. This fails to acknowledge the potential for significant operational disruption and resource overutilization. Ethically and professionally, it is irresponsible to cause widespread business interruption without a clear understanding of the incident's severity and impact. This approach could violate the principle of proportionality in incident response. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the incident as low priority and delay any significant investigation until more concrete evidence of a breach is presented. This is a critical regulatory and ethical failure. Forensic security professionals have a duty to investigate potential security incidents promptly. Delaying action could lead to further data loss, increased damage, and noncompliance with any applicable data breach notification laws or internal security policies. This approach neglects the proactive nature of forensic security. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on automated tools to identify the scope of the incident, without human oversight or contextual understanding. While automation is valuable, it can miss subtle indicators or misinterpret data without expert analysis. This can lead to an incomplete or inaccurate understanding of the incident, potentially resulting in inadequate containment or remediation, which is a failure in professional due diligence and adherence to best practices in forensic analysis. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured incident response methodology that begins with an initial assessment and triage. This involves understanding the nature of the suspected incident, its potential impact, and the affected systems. Based on this initial assessment, a risk level should be assigned, guiding the subsequent steps of containment, eradication, and recovery. This decision-making process requires critical thinking, an understanding of the organization's business operations and risk tolerance, and a thorough knowledge of forensic investigation techniques and relevant regulatory expectations. The goal is to achieve an effective and efficient response that minimizes harm and ensures compliance.